Fourscore and 7 years ago, Movies You Missed podcast comes to you with episode 146 with some horror comedies and some horror seriousness. V, how are you today?
I'm doing well today, John. Thank you. I had a proper good time with both of these films.
Good. Glad to hear it. I had not seen your pick in, almost 10 years. It's been a very long time.
Wow, and I'd never seen your pick before at all.
Oh, sweet. I had actually seen my pick blindly. I bought the Blu-ray at Amoeba Music several years ago, and it's kind of become an every Halloween watch for my wife and I. Big fans of the movie, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it. But before we get into all of that, welcome back to Movies You Missed podcast, everybody. We are coming up on our yearly review. We're also coming up on our Oscars episode, which is going to be very fucking interesting, considering the Oscar nominations came out last week, and V and I are both very under-fucking-whelmed.
We're also not excited to finish watching all of the Oscar nominations that have come out.
Very true. I will be honest, I'm actually interested in seeing I'm Still Here. That's supposed to be a pretty good one. Nickel Boys, I've read about, and we'll see what that's all about. But considering what I've heard about Emilia Perez, I am not at all interested, and I have not been interested in Honora since the inception of that movie, so we'll see what happens. You never know. It might be one of my favorites of the year, but I highly doubt it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, so please, everyone, stay tuned for our Oscars recap episode where we discuss those films.
Oh yeah, can't wait. We are John and V. We have been friends for going on almost 27 years now. We've spent collectively 25 years in the entertainment industry. We also do not spoil any of the movies that we talk about here, and we like to bring movies to you, our audience, that we feel have been a little bit underrated, fallen under the radar, or just movies that need to be revisited. And I feel like this is a perfect example of movies that need to be revisited, this episode in particular.
Oh, I would argue that this episode in particular is movies that are severely underrated.
Ah, yes. Well, there we go. 2 categories which you are about to be slapped in the face with.
Well, last week's episode was movies that need to be revisited, because those are
very, very true.
Highly rated films.
Yes. And even though, we end our podcast with all opinions are valid, V's were not valid at all last week.
We've repaired our friendship, thankfully, so this podcast will go on. But it's still rocky, so we'll see how we're doing after I share my opinion about this week's first watch of John's pick. And I think now is a good time to tell our audience what our topic is this week.
Yes, V, good point. And since there were a couple of missing episodes, which at some point in the future we will remedy, we went back to the month of October this week to bring about 2 films that are set in the horror realm, one a comedy, one not so much a comedy, but a blast at least. So,
yeah, I want to say it's a historical horror?
Yes, historical horror. That's actually a very good way to put it. I, for whatever reason, didn't put that together.
Well, I think it's a newer subgenre of horror.
I'll take it. Me, as a horror fan, I'm very excited to talk about both of these movies.
Me too. As a new horror fan since the inception of our podcast.
Absolutely. But before we get into that, we do love to discuss the movies that we've seen in theaters or on streaming this week. So, V, I'm curious, what did you see?
This will actually be my last update for 2024 movies, which is fitting.
Yeah?
Well, since we're doing the recap next week, makes sense, right?
Oh, yeah, very true.
And I actually watched 3 new movies last week, but I think I'm only going to talk about 2 of them.
Okay, and I'm curious as to why that is.
Yeah, you'll understand why in a second. So, the 3 movies I watched last week were The Commandant's Shadow, The Wild Robot, and Nosferatu.
Oh, alrighty.
But I want to hold off on the discussion for Nosferatu until next week's episode when we're discussing our recap when we rank these movies, because then I think we'll really get into it.
Okay. Well, I already know where this is going.
Yeah, so stay tuned for next week's episode for that full discussion, and instead I'll talk about the other 2 movies I watched. First, The Commandant's Shadow. It's a documentary. It's on HBO. I highly recommend everybody watch this film. It's on my can't-miss movie list of the year. It is about the children and grandchildren of Rudolf Höss, the Commandant of Auschwitz.
Oh, shit. I don't even know how I've not even heard of this movie.
It's absolutely incredible. This is a must-watch film, and the way this film follows these people and what they learn and how they're dealing with generational trauma is mirrored by following a woman who survived Auschwitz.
Wow.
So these stories are told in parallel. I was speechless for the entire film. It really affected me. It's a very well-made documentary. Like I said, absolutely incredible. Highly, highly recommend this film. Again, it's called The Commandant's Shadow, and it's on HBO.
All right. Well, that is definitely something I am going to have to subject myself to. I had no idea about this documentary.
I think you'll really love it.
Great.
The next film I watched has been nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Film of the Year. I was very excited to watch this film. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to watch it in theaters when it was out, but it is now streaming on Peacock. It is also going to be on my list of can't miss movies of the year. It is called The Wild Robot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this movie is so incredible. It is so good. I cried. I was uplifted. The music is amazing. It's like a painting. The style of animation is breathtaking. It is so gorgeous. It's like watercolors come to life on screen. I was so grateful to watch this movie on a big TV. The voice acting is great too. Lupita Nyong'o, Pedro Pascal, Catherine O'Hara, Bill Nighy. There's a ton of recognizable actors in this film. They all do a fantastic job. I can't say enough about this film. It's one of my favorite films of the year. Everybody should watch it. It's so moving. It's such a beautiful story. It's very funny as well.
Oh, great.
And the man who directed this film, just to give you guys an idea of the quality of The Wild Robot, Chris Saunders directed it.
Ah, yes.
He helped write the screenplay to Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King, Lilo and Stitch. Shall I go on?
Oh, yeah.
This man's incredible.
Yeah,
He's a fantastic writer and director, and I was so happy to watch this film. I'm so glad I made sure to watch it as well. I can't recommend it enough. I was elated by the end of this film.
Awesome. I remember seeing the trailer and being very excited about it as well. I think it is actually in a re-release right now because of the Academy Award nominations that just came out.
Oh, that's possible,
I will very likely be checking this movie out. I've been wanting to see it. I just haven't had a chance to yet, so I'm glad to hear all of this. Sounds like this year's Elemental, maybe?
I definitely got that vibe when I was watching it as well. Yeah.
Nice.
Right on.
Awesome.
Right on the money with that analogy.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, John, what are the movies you saw this week?
Oh, boy, where to begin? I saw 3 new movies. Exactly. I saw 3 new movies over the last week. I'm going to start with the movie that absolutely infuriated me to no end as one of the biggest pieces of shit that I've seen this year, and I thought that was going to be Wolfman, but I have standed corrected with the new movie directed by Steven Soderbergh, written by David Coep, which makes me even more fucking furious. Starring Lucy Liu, which also makes me more furious. This movie is called Presence. This movie absolutely sucks. I was into it for 15 minutes. I liked where they were going with it. Nothing fucking happened. The end of the movie was absolutely batshit stupidity. This is this year's Asteroid City.
That's okay, but when you were burning that film in infamy, you reminded me that I actually watched one other movie this week.
Oh, all right. Let's hear it.
When you said nothing happened, that's what triggered it. I watched A Real Pain, a movie where nothing happens.
Oh, shit. You know what? I fucking watched it, too. Okay, so I've seen 4 movies. There it is. That's how forgettable that movie was as well.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah.
Perfect message for our audience, the fact that both of us forgot to even mention that we watched it.
I definitely did watch A Real Pain. V, apparently you did too.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that movie was not good either.
No.
Why is Kieran, whatever the fuck his name is?
Kieran.
Yeah, sure, fine, whatever, I don't care. Why is he nominated for an Oscar? This movie? What the fuck?
And he also acts exactly like Ronan Roy, his character in Succession. So
I haven't seen Succession.
Yeah,
However,
he acts almost exactly the same. There's no range there. And Jesse Eisenberg acts exactly how he always acts because he has no range whatsoever. And I don't understand why he keeps getting jobs. I guess because he directed this film.
I was going to say he wrote and directed this movie. Yeah, there was the moment when they are at Auschwitz that I had a bit of, empathy for, but the rest of the movie, I'm just kind of sitting there.
I was waiting for it to get good. I was waiing for something to happen.
I was on my phone a lot during that fucking movie. Mostly reading the trivia and like, A Real Pain is really not good either.
It was a real pain to watch.
Very, very true.
Okay,
indeed.
sorry to interrupt your recap. Keep going.
Oh, no, it's totally fine because, again, we both forgot we watched it. I ended up seeing Flight Risk, the new Mel Gibson-directed Mark Wahlberg and Topher Grace and Michelle Dockery. My father was very interested in seeing this movie, as was I. It looked pretty good.
No,
we went and saw it in... okay. We went and saw it in 4DX. If you go into this movie with a serious mindset, you're going to be very disappointed because this is not a very serious movie at all. It's a lot of fun. It's very funny. And it's a little bit twisted as well. It's not a great movie, but it's also a great movie. It's one of those movies that is, it'll teeter on my 2025 could miss, should miss. I had a good time with it. So did my dad. If you like Mark Wahlberg, Topher Grace, or Michelle Dockery, or Mel Gibson, give it a shot. It's definitely a different route for Mel Gibson.
I like only one of those people, so I will not be partaking in watching that film.
All right, man, that's fine. It's all good. No big deal. It's really not going to be the crowning achievement of 2025.
No, it's a Mark Wahlberg movie. Of course it won't.
Just like The Union.
And The Family Plan.
The other film that I went and saw was the new Keke Palmer Zaw film comedy, One of Them Days. Nothing we haven't seen before. Very entertaining movie. I laughed a lot. I had a good time with it. It's probably going to be on my 2025 movies you could miss. Not necessarily a movie you should miss, but again, it's nothing you haven't seen before, but very entertaining. I left the movie feeling like I got what I kind of expected, unlike Presence.
Okay.
Yeah. So that is what I watched over the last week.
All right.
Fantastic. Well, V, I think it's time we jump into your pick this week. What do you say?
I think that's a great idea.
All right, let's do it.
All right, I picked a horror comedy because it is my favorite subgenre of horror. As a lot of you know, if you've been listening for a while, I am a big horror fan at this point, thanks to John and thanks to him jogging my memory over the last couple Octobers of just how many horror movies I love. This one is no different. It is a horror comedy. It turns a lot of tropes on its head.
Yes.
It also has one of my favorite underrated actors in it, so I'm really excited to dive into it.
Let's do it.
All right, I picked a movie from 2010, a small independent film with only a $5 million budget. This is Tucker and Dale versus Evil.
Nice.
Tucker and Dale are two sweet men who have been best friends since they were little kids and are so excited because they have finally purchased their very own vacation cabin.
Yeah.
And what are these good old boys going to do? Well, this weekend, they're actually going to go up with a bunch of tools and fix up this little cabin in the woods.
Hey, that's a great movie, too.
Oh, I haven't seen it, but yeah, I've heard it's really good.
Oh, I thought you'd seen Cabin in the Woods.
No.
I thought that was literally a pun that you were making.
I'm just
hey, look at that.
Good.
Unintentional. Cabin in the Woods is a great fucking movie.
Oh, well, you have to put it on the list then.
Oh, it's on the list.
Oh, great. Okay. But unlike Cabin in the Woods, this film is about camaraderie and loyalty and some good old-fashioned fun.
Oh, yeah.
And while Tucker and Dale are driving up to their cabin, they actually pass a Suburban of a bunch of shitbag college students.
Great way to introduce these people.
Thank you. Just a bunch of frat boys who you really don't want to have anything to do with. God, these kids suck.
Yeah, pretty much.
And we were introduced to these kids back at a rest stop, actually, the final store that they could stop at before getting to their destination, which was camping out in those same woods. Now, once Tucker and Dale set up, their poor cabin needs a lot of TLC, but these guys are resourceful and industrious, and they're going to get it done. And that's actually why Dale was wearing the hat that he was wearing throughout the whole film. He has a hat that says Giver, and it's GIV''ER. And I was always wondering what that hat was all about. Well, first of all, it alludes to Dale's kind and generous nature, which he is.
Yes.
But also it is the Canadian equivalent of Get Her Done.
Ah,
and
all right.
as a redneck, that makes sense that he's wearing that hat.
Very much so, yes.
Yeah. And I might need to get that hat for you. And now once Tucker and Dale have settled into their new home and they're so excited for this vacation cabin to be theirs, they get to work. After a long day of chores, they decide to go out onto the lake with their canoe and go fishing. But when they're out there, well, we run into all the frat kids again.
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, one of them, named Allison, she climbs up on this rock. And Tucker and Dale are really worried about her because it's kind of high up there and they don't want to startle her. But unfortunately, they do in their boat. And she falls and hits her head on the way down. So, as kind gentlemen, they paddle over to her and rescue her and take her back to their cabin. And unfortunately, she has a bit of a head injury, so they wrap it up and try to nurse her back to health as much as they can because they are, in fact, in the middle of nowhere. And they try to get word out to all of her friends that they have her, that she's safe and okay, and that they want to meet up so they can basically give her back to them. And for the rest of the movie, that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
All right, so from the frat kid's perspective, this movie starts out with them going on a weekend camping trip all together into some woods that unfortunately have a pretty bad reputation because way back in the day there was actually a serial killer out there. But not to worry, that was a long time ago. They're all together. They're going to have a great time. But damn it, somebody's forgotten all the beer.
Yes, as always, there's something always forgotten.
Always forgotten. And so these kids stop at the last store they can find to get some. And unfortunately, while they're there, they run into two gross hicks who seem very creepy. And one of them even tries to come up to the women and talk to them. And he's very awkward and very weird. And he's just kind of staring at them and laughing at them. And he makes all of them very uncomfortable, so they leave. And on the road, unfortunately, they actually pass these two rednecks once again. And they are just as creepy as they were before, staring at them, being all silent and weird. And these kids just want to really get away from these two guys. So they set up their tents and they're having a good time and tell a couple creepy stories, and they all decide to go swimming in the lake that night. So that's what they do. But unfortunately, their friend Allison climbs up onto this rock and she's going to jump off, and she slips, and lo and behold, those two creepy guys are back and they kidnap Allison.
Yeah.
And even boast about it to them and say, hey, we got your friend. And so what are these college kids going to do? Well, they're not going to leave their friend to be taken and kidnapped by these two creeps. And so they're going to go rescue her. And that's what they do. They go and try to rescue poor Allison from these two hillbilly, maybe killers, definitely creeps that we don't want to trust, in this dilapidated cabin out in the woods. And every single time they get organized and try to formulate a plan to go save Allison from these two guys, something horrific happens, and these guys just keep killing all of their friends. One of them gets stabbed by a giant tree branch. There's a wasp nest involved. There's the best wood chipper scene I've ever seen, and that is including Fargo.
I was going to say, beyond Fargo, definitely.
It's the best wood chipper scene I've ever watched. And these poor kids are dropping like flies because these two guys are the serial killers that they were telling horror stories about.
Yeah.
And so for the rest of the movie, these kids are just trying to survive and save their poor friend Allison from these two murderers, and it's just not going the way they planned. And the reality is, this is a horror comedy, and these poor guys are really just the nicest guys you've ever met. And they just keep getting into the worst misunderstandings of their lives, including when they're just driving out there and they get pulled over by the sheriff.
Oh my gosh. So ridiculous.
This is one of the audio clips I want to use because it's a perfect example of the misunderstandings that are happening throughout this whole film.
Where are you two headed?
We're headed to our vacation home up by Morris Lake. Sank every penny I had into it. Me and Dale here, we're going to go fix her up. Maybe do a little fishing.
Do a little fishing.
He's been striking out with the ladies. I figure a little man time might do him some good.
And poor Tucker and Dale just are having a hell of a weekend because they just keep trying to fix their cabin, and this poor girl Allison gets involved and comes in, and then at one point Tucker is sawing down this dead log with a chainsaw and saws through a wasp nest, which is one of the funniest scenes of the whole film because he's running with his chainsaw trying to get rid of these wasps.
Yeah. I love that moment in the movie.
I love it too.
Well, we'll get into it in a minute.
Yeah, and so this is such a hilarious film. I won't get too much further into it just because you cannot believe the situations that these people find themselves in, because not only is it ridiculous, but it's also still in the realm of plausibility. So
yes,
it's not
exactly.
too over the top, which is what I love about this film. And you think that, okay, there's no way that this can get any worse. And it just keeps going.
Oh, yeah. It just keeps fucking going.
And I love this film so much. There are so many great lines in the movie as well. And at one point, these kids, they're all trying to save their friend. And the worst case scenario keeps happening every time. And finally, Dale turns to Allison, who's now woken up from her head injury. And Dale goes,
Do some of your friends take medication? Why?
Because I think they forgot to take it.
These poor guys don't know what the hell these kids are doing.
They
and
have no idea.
then the sheriff gets involved, which is another really hilarious scene.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, the sheriff comes to the house, and then all of a sudden, yeah, the scenarios that crack down in
Everybody gets
the
themselves
entirety of this
into.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Tucker and Dale are just like, what the fuck is going on?
I know,
They have like no idea like how all of this is playing out.
No, these poor guys. And this movie keeps up the momentum. It's funny throughout the whole entire film, even all the way to the end. I love the end scene. It's a very fun climactic ending to the film. And yeah, I've just been a fan of this movie since I saw it about 5 years ago. I didn't see it in theaters because it did come out in 2010, but oh man, I've been a fan of it ever since I watched it for the first time. So I'm really excited to talk to you about this film. I'm glad to have it on the podcast, and I'm excited to hear your opinion on it too.
Definitely. When you mentioned that you were going to put it on your list, I was very excited. This was my second time seeing this movie.
Okay.
I haven't seen this movie in 10 plus years. I mean, we're in 2025 now. So I guess I haven't seen it in almost 15 years, which is crazy to think about. But I remember the first time I watched it, I definitely laughed my entire ass off. I thought Alan Tudyk was great, and I thought Tyler Labine was great. I ended up not officially working with him per se, but I was an editor for a lot of the TV spots for a show that he was on that Kevin Smith produced for the CW called Reaper back in the day.
Oh.
And yeah, I always thought that he was pretty good. I thought his 5 minutes in Zack and Miri Make a Porno, the Kevin Smith movie, was great. And I think that might be why he got the role, because he was in Reaper. But anyway, Alan Tudyk is so hysterical in this movie, and all of the college kids, you know, it's kind of funny to think like, oh, well, it's very stereotypical. It is, but at the same time, the way that this movie plays out is not in any way stereotypical.
Exactly, yeah.
And it is so fucking funny. And like you said, the whole thing with the cop at the door was great. At one point or another, people just keep dropping like flies. And it's and the fact that these college kids think that Tucker and Dale are the ones that are out to get them, when in actuality they're just kind of trying to save their lives. But for whatever reason, nothing goes right is just fantastic. I had a great time rewatching this movie. I don't know if I'd own it. It's one of those movies that is definitely enjoyable. I would not turn it off if I was flipping through the channels, or if like you came over, or if anybody had not seen it. I'd absolutely watch it again. Overall, I'd give it like a 4 out of 5. Like it's definitely a lot of fun. Alan Tudyk is great. The whole thing with when Dale is pulling out the bee stingers in his face. That
pours
cracks
beer
me up.
over himself.
Yeah, oh my gosh.
So
and all they want to do is just drink Pabst Blue Ribbon, and you know. And I think it's great too that they allude to the fact that they've been best friends forever, and that and Tucker is always trying to push Dale to be more himself, go talk to girls, you know, and all this stuff. And so
Don't
the
be
moment
shy.
when
You're a good-looking man.
Yeah, exactly. And he brings a scythe with him when he goes to talk to the girls. It's like, what the fuck? But at the same time, it's just that vibe of the movie, and it's a dirty movie. Like it's definitely like, ooh, gosh, there's a lot of blood and guts in this movie. But it's very, very fucking funny, and I had a great time revisiting it, so I'm really glad that you put it on the podcast.
I'm so glad to hear that, and yes, I think it's one of those movies where I'm the same way. Like, I do own it digitally, but it's not one of those staples of October that I'd watch every single year.
Sure.
Just because comedies, there are only a very small amount of comedies that you can watch that often without them getting old, right?
Oh, yeah.
But every couple of years, it's certainly on my rotation of horror comedies, along with Zombieland, Ready or Not, you know, those kinds of films. And I'll go through them, like I said, on a rotation instead of watching them every single time. I'm really glad you had a good time with it. And like you said, it's stereotypical. You know, the head frat boy is named Chad because, of course, that's what his name is.
Of course. 100%.
And it was actually Alan Tudyk's idea to pour beer all over his face after getting into the wasp nest.
That was great.
Yeah. And the brilliance of this is there actually are some very creative accidents in this film.
Yes.
And the horror genre, of course, has been explored in so many different ways in terms of using household objects as weapons. And so the way some of these things go in this movie are actually somewhat surprising, and you didn't see all of them coming, which is always a lot of fun. And Alan Tudyk, as many of you know, we talk about him a lot on this podcast because he's immensely talented. Tyler Labine did a great job playing off him and keeping up with him, and they were great together. They had a really good rapport.
They were a great pair.
They really were. And Alan Tudyk, as a reminder, this is the third film we've picked of his so far. He was in your pick of A Knight's Tale in episode 23.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Which has a funny connection to your movie this week.
It absolutely does.
He's also Steve the Pirate in Dodgeball, my pick from episode 93.
Yeah. Gosh.
And he is Wash the pilot in Firefly and the movie Serenity. And he also is an incredible voice actor. He's the Duke Wesselton in Frozen. He's in Big Hero 6, Zootopia, Moana. He plays Hey Hey the Rooster in Moana. He's the droid in Rogue One, which we just need to pick at some point because we talk about that movie enough.
We really do.
He's King Candy in Wreck-It Ralph. He's in...
Yeah.
Most recently, he stars in the show Resident Alien, and in a connection to last week's episode, he also was in Deadpool 2 in a cameo in the same scene as Matt Damon.
That's right.
They played two rednecks sitting on the back of a truck.
Yeah.
And I actually think I'm going to buy this movie for you, and purely for selfish reasons.
Okay.
Because a special feature on the DVD plays the movie from the college kid's perspective and makes Tucker and Dale the villains.
No way. I could be all right with that. I could be down to watch that
fun.
version.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Wow. I wonder how they did that.
I don't know. Just some good editing, I think.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And at one point in this film, there's actually a nail gun that's used.
Oh, yeah, there is.
And the reason I bring this up is because as someone who spent a big chunk of their lives working in construction, a big pet peeve of mine is when movies use tools in a physically impossible way. And that means like the tool was never built to be used like that, so it couldn't actually work that way in the film, right? In real life.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of times they do this with nail guns, for example, in Lethal Weapon. You can't just pick up a nail gun and fire it. A nail's not going to come out. It's got a safety catch. And
really? I did not know.
Yeah, so there's a little piece of metal that's a safety catch that actually you have to put pressure on it in order for the gun to fire, and that's basically, so you don't accidentally shoot yourself in the leg with a nail, but it's so you can push it against a piece of wood, then you can pull the trigger and the nail will come out.
Ah.
And this is the first movie I've ever seen that utilizes a nail gun where somebody actually holds that safety catch back and then fires the nail gun, and that's how nails can come out. You have to pull back on that safety catch in order for it to be fired. And they actually do that in this film because Dale picks it up, pulls back on that safety, and then starts firing that nail gun out the window.
Right.
And I love that it was actually accurate. It's an accurate portrayal of a nail gun, so thank you for that. It's like my pet peeve of drinking out of empty cups. It drives me crazy
Yes.
in movies.
Oh,
I hate
my
it.
gosh.
I hate it.
No, I'm with you on that one.
And there's a moment in this film when they're talking about their friendship. And at one point, Dale is mentioning how he used to lick frogs down at the creek. And it's so random, and of course, it's Dale. He's such a goof. It makes sense that he would say something like that. But there's a very specific reason why this was said, which I love so much. It's such a deep cut. I'm sorry, but I'm so excited.
No, that's fine.
So Tyler Labine, who plays Dale, in 3 episodes of The X-Files, he played this total stoner kid. And
really?
Yeah. And him and his friends tried a bunch of different things to get high. And there's this whole joke throughout his 3-episode arc where they try to smoke a bunch of random shit to get high, and they're just stupid kids, right? And at one point, they're down at a lake, and they are licking the frogs down at the lake to try to get high. And so Tyler Labine saying this in Tucker and Dale versus Evil is specifically a callback to when he was on the X-Files 14 years earlier.
Wow. That's cool. Again,
so
I have
awesome.
not seen the X-Files.
That's
so
okay.
I thought that he blasted onto the scene with Reaper at the CW. I didn't know that he actually had been around that long. That's very cool.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time, and yeah,
Nice.
he's specifically referencing that when he talked about licking frogs.
That's great.
They're like, oh, these are the frogs that make you hallucinate. Idiots. And you mentioned Cabin in the Woods, which is funny because there are a lot of homages to classic horror films in this movie, which of course there are. That happens a lot of time in horror films as well.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact that this is turning a lot of tropes on its head, I think it's so great that they utilize some really classic scenes, and just at one point there's a great parallel scene to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre that is hilarious. Cabin Fever, and even Halloween.
Yes.
So that is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It is a fantastic horror comedy. I really want my sister Suzanne to watch it specifically. I think she'd have a very good time with it. I love this film. I've seen it several times and will continue to watch it every couple of Octobers. I hope you all give this a try. And she can, and so can all of you, if you have a Peacock subscription. So I'm very happy to hear that you enjoyed this film, and it definitely falls into the underrated category for our picks. It had a budget of $5 million, and worldwide it made $5.2 million.
Well,
it's a bummer.
It was a low budget independent horror comedy.
It certainly was. It didn't feel low budget in terms of a lot of the stunts and special effects. I thought overall, a lot of the killings looked very good.
Definitely.
So it didn't feel cheap, but it definitely was more of an independent film.
Yeah. It's still a great time, though.
Of course.
If you have not seen it, it's definitely worth watching.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. So that is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Like I said, you can watch it on Peacock, and I'm so glad to be able to talk about a horror comedy outside of October.
Oh, definitely.
Love this subgenre so much. All right, John, I think it's time to roll back over 100 years and talk about your film.
Yes, let's do it. And that is actually how I did watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil the second time around for me. Great movie, great choice. I think it kind of fits with my pick this week.
I mean...
Yeah, I know. My movie's not actually very funny at all.
No, I thought yours was going to be funnier.
I think the thing about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is the fact that the title is hilarious.
Yes.
And some of the sequences are beyond entertaining and fantastic. And I remember the first time watching it just kind of laughing a lot. But then I've watched it a couple of times over the years, and I'm like, this actually is not a funny movie.
No.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I
No.
still think it's a blast, and I'm very, very curious to hear what you had to say, especially after Interstellar last week. So
Yes.
we will jump into Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, coming to you from the year 2012. This film is directed by Timur Bekmambetov. We have not discussed him before. He is a Russian director. He blasted on the American scene, albeit because a Russian film that he directed called Night Watch, which is on my list in the future, really took a lot of American audiences by storm. It is a phenomenal piece of sci-fi fantasy. It's really one of my favorite movies. I'll never forget introducing my dad to it. He's actually borrowed it a few times from me so he can rewatch it. It's a really cool movie. This movie, though, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, is in the title. I'll do what I can to break this movie down as quickly as possible to get into a lot of the really, really fun BTS and fight sequences and cinematography, and the fact that this was actually shot for a 3D release. You might have actually picked that up, especially with the whip early on in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah, well, every time I watch it, I'm kind of like, man, back when 3D TVs were like a real big thing, I was always like, I gotta get a 3D TV, I gotta get this. I'm glad that I never actually went down that route because I love my 4K QLED Samsung TV, and I'm sure you love yours as well. But, every now and then, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to actually rewatch Avatar or Avatar Way of Water or even Jurassic Park in 3D, which they actually did several years ago.
I've never jumped on the 3D train. It just never did enough for me to buy a TV specifically for that.
Right. I think it's better in theaters. I don't think it needs to be seen that way at home.
Agreed. And the other problem is that you and I both wear glasses, and so it complicates things when we need to put another pair of glasses on top.
Sure.
I always have to plan things out and put contacts in if I know I'm going to watch a 3D movie. So, yeah, there was always something extra and something else to it. So I'm more interested in the 4K than I am the 3D route.
Sure. I will never put contacts in my eyes because I have a weird thing about touching my eyeballs. So I can empathize with you having to figure that whole thing out.
My dad has the same thing, actually. He will never, ever put anything like that in his eyes. He's worn glasses since he was in second grade.
Oh, yeah. I've been wearing glasses since the 8th grade. Okay. And I would much rather wear glasses. I get a lot of compliments on mine. I mean, my frames change every couple of years. I've actually had the ones I'm wearing now the longest. I think they work with my facial structure. But anyway, let's get into Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. This film is written by Seth Kenneth Grahame Smith. He also wrote the novel, of which I own, and my wife has actually read several years ago. I have not read the novel yet. One day I probably will. I found it at Goodwill, I think about a year ago, for like 75 cents. So I was like, ooh, I like the movie. I'll read the book. Still haven't read the book.
That's cool that there is a book, though.
Yeah, definitely. This movie falls along the lines of Pride and Prejudice and zombies. You know, like they're throwing in historical novelization, historical figures, and things that a lot of people can relate to, and then they just like throw in vampires or zombies, or, you know, and why not? I love Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. It's got Lily James in it. It's going to be on my list in the future, but we're not talking about that yet. We will talk a little bit more about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Again, directed by Timur Bekmambetov. Like I said, from Night Watch. If you don't know him by name, he also directed the James McAvoy, Morgan Freeman, and Angelina Jolie-led film Wanted, which I just watched for the first time last year, and what a fucking blast that movie is.
It's a lot of fun, and his name is another one of our Easter eggs, because Bekmambetov, his last name, is very much like a metal band. That would be a great name for him.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we're Bekmambetov, or we're Timur Bekmambetov. That would be pretty cool. Yeah, I'm down. Look at that. I like that. So, jumping into a little bit about what Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter is. We meet Abraham Lincoln and his friend Will very early on in their lives. They are living in Indiana in 1818. They're accompanying their fathers to their jobs. One thing leads to another where Will is about to be whipped. And this is also during the slavery explosion in the early 1800s. Of course, you know, we all know what Abraham Lincoln did for the slave trade with the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln is trying to protect Will from one of the foremen here at this dock that we are introduced to them both at. So Abraham Lincoln's father, after all of this madness and Will being whipped, his father decides that he really does not want any more to do with his employment, not going to be involved with this. And this is where we also meet Jack Bartz, played by Barton Kosix,
who I recognize from Triple X.
I was going to say, he is in Triple X. He has got quite the resume. He's in The Equalizer. He's in Aeon Flux, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He's also in one of my favorite horror films from last year, Cuckoo. He's a great actor. He's versatile. He also plays a mean son of a bitch in just about every role that he's in.
He also has that unidentifiable accent like Peter Stormare, where he makes him very adaptable as an actor.
Exactly. He was actually born in New Zealand. So I think similar to Peter Stormare.
Never would have guessed.
Yeah, when we found out where he's actually from, like, no fucking way. Like I said, he's very adaptable. He's just a beast. And in this movie, he tells Abraham Lincoln's father that, you know what, that's fine. You just need to pay me your restitution and with interest. Otherwise, I'm going to have to take it from you in other ways. Later on that night, Abraham is trying to sleep, and he hears a little bit of a rustling downstairs and sees Jack Bartz bite his mother as a vampire. So this is our early introduction to the fact that vampires exist in the U.S. in the early 1800s.
That jump scare got me so bad. I literally yelled out on my couch when I was watching this film.
Oh, did you really?
Oh, yeah.
Were you watching it in the dark by yourself?
I was.
All right. And I'm going to give you, for the first time I watched it, I think Amy and I, we were living in Studio City. We had the volume cranked up, and that moment when the camera pans to the wood frame and then right into that crack, and he's looking up at Abraham.
Oh, God.
Holy shit. Even now, and I've seen this movie 4 or 5 times, it's still fucking scary. He's got the black eyes, his that pale skin, the hair on the hat, everything is pretty badass. And I gotta say, as crazy as this movie is and outlandish and insane, this movie kind of brings me back to Interview with a Vampire. So, unfortunately, his mother passes away. Fast forward to 20 years later, where Abraham has now become Benjamin Walker.
He was great in this film.
Wasn't he fucking awesome? He's in a future pick of mine. He is actually in the Heart of the Sea. He plays Captain Pollard. He and Chris Hemsworth go at each other so fantastically in so many scenes in that movie. I cannot wait to introduce you to this movie, because I had seen In the Heart of the Sea before I saw this movie.
Oh.
So when I saw this movie, I was like, I know this guy. Benjamin Walker is now in his 20s. He's Abraham Lincoln as an adult. He is trying to find his way through life and also trying to figure out a way that he can track down Jack Bartz and get his revenge. And Vee, I know you love revenge movies. So we'll get into your thoughts very very soon here, because I'm almost done breaking this movie down. So one night, Abraham is out at a bar. He thinks he's got a little bit of a tip on where a vampire might be that could actually lead him to Jack Bart's. He ends up meeting Henry Sturgis, played bitchin'ly by Dominic Cooper.
God, I'm in love with that man.
Yeah, he's kind of fucking handsome.
He's so hot. He's been hot in everything I've ever seen him in. He's incredible in this movie called The Devil's Devil.
I have not seen that movie. I want to see it so bad.
And he's also the fiance in the movie Mamma Mia.
Oh, is it? Well, again, I haven't seen those movies, but I will take your word for it.
Yeah, I love every time I see him pop up on screen.
Nice. Yeah, he's great in this movie. He ends up coming up to Abraham Lincoln and saying these words, which I absolutely love.
Haven't you had enough? A boy only gets this drunk when he wants to kiss a girl or kill a man.
So after all of this, Henry decides to take Abraham under his wing, teaching him how to slay vampires. And I love that whole sequence. I love the whole axe thing with the tree. And this movie is definitely outside the box, right?
Yes.
This is not a historically accurate film, obviously.
Well,
by
it
any means.
Follows Abraham Lincoln's life very closely and
That's very true.
very loyally. I mean, this is historically accurate when it comes to Abraham Lincoln.
You beat me to it, and that's fine. I completely love you for that, because it absolutely does. And another cool thing about this movie is all of the locations are historically accurate, as are the costumes and the hairstyles.
Nice.
So yeah, that jumps into a little bit of the BTS for this movie. So after Henry and Abraham meet, Abraham ends up moving to Illinois and starting to work his way through his political aspirations. This is also where we meet Mary Todd, played wonderfully by Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Oh my God,
and we
yes.
meet Joshua Speed, played by Jimmy Simpson. This is also when we meet Stephen A. Douglas, played by none other than Tucker of Vee's pick just a few minutes ago, Alan Tudyk.
That's right. I was so happy to see him pop up in this film and thought it was so
I completely
crazy.
forgot he was in it.
The connection between our movies.
I know. It was great. When I was watching this again, I was like, holy shit, completely forgot about that. Stephen is, at the time, engaged to Mary Todd, played by Elizabeth Winstead, and she kind of starts to have a thing for Abraham Lincoln early on. But after all of these meetings and everything like that, and like we just said, this follows a bit historically accurate where Abraham Lincoln goes with his political aspirations. Throughout this whole movie, he and Henry have a correspondence through letters where Henry sends him a letter to let him know where certain vampires are to slay them. And for the rest of the movie, we are along with Abraham Lincoln as he works his way through the political system for freedom towards the Emancipation Proclamation, and while Henry keeps sending him letters to give him more and more clues as to how to get to the head vampire, Adam, played by Rufus Sewell, to where he can exact his revenge on the vampire community for killing his mother when he was a child. I love this movie. I wish I had seen it in theaters, but it is so much fun. It's brutal. The vampire sequences are so badass, especially later on when he and Adam actually start to go at it at each other. And then the whole thing with Henry's backstory. And we also are introduced to Will as an adult, played by Anthony Mackie. So this film is just stacked with a fantastic barrage of character actors included. I'm a big fan of it, and I'm very curious to hear V's views on Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter from 2012. V, what did you think?
I had so much fun watching this film.
Yay!
It's a bit off the wall in terms of some of the action sequences. Some of the CGI did not hold up very well, but I love how creative the story is. Take a major figure from history and put a massive sci-fi / fantasy twist on it and see what happens. And I had so much fun. It was such a wild ride. Some of the fight sequences, especially at the plantation, I was hollering at the TV because it was so badass. It was so fun.
Nice.
Great stunt choreography, great fighting choreography as well. There were so many actors in this film who I recognized.
Oh, yeah.
It was so fun. And, Anthony Mackie is now a huge part of the MCU. His new Captain America movie's coming out soon.
Yeah, which I probably will see. It looks like fun, even though Harrison Ford is now in the MCU.
Oh,
kind of weird.
As a Hulk.
Yeah, very strange.
Well, he took over for William Hurt.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah. It was great to see Alan Tudyk in this movie. It's funny that he and Rufus Sewell were in A Knight's Tale together, but they didn't share any scenes in this film.
Very true.
Speaking of the fighting sequences, there's a move in this movie, and this came out before Game of Thrones. There's a knife sequence move.
Oh, yes.
That is killer.
Oh,
and
yeah. No pun
reminded me,
intended.
yeah, no pun intended, or pun intended, and it totally reminded me of Game of Thrones. And I was like, oh, maybe that's where they got it from. Fantastic.
Ah, yeah. You know, that's funny that you bring that up because every time it happens when I watch this movie, I'm like, fuck yeah!
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, yes!
No, that's how I was acting watching this film. It'll hype you up. It's so much fun. It's great. I'm sure it's a great movie to watch with friends.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little ridiculous, but I mean, it's in the title, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Vampire Hunter.
This isn't going to be a serious film. And if
No.
you approach it as such, it's a hell of a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. I certainly would watch it again.
Awesome.
And I thought Benjamin did such a fantastic job as Abraham Lincoln. I was very impressed with his acting prowess. He carried the film very nicely. I think my favorite part of the movie, besides the fight scene at the plantation, there's a line in it that really hit me. I haven't been hit that hard in months and months and months by a line in a film.
Oh, wow.
At one point, somebody says, "Men have enslaved each other since they have invented God to forgive them for doing it."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And that just knocked me back. It was an incredible piece of writing in a, in a movie about Abraham Lincoln hunting vampires. So
Yeah.
that really just took me by surprise as well. So yes, I really loved this film. Thank you for introducing it to me.
Hell yeah.
I think my dad would really enjoy this movie. He likes films like this, just like you and I do.
Yeah.
And so I hope it's on a streaming service at some point so you could give it a watch.
I hope so too. I actually bought the Blu-ray blindly at Amoeba one afternoon. I saw the trailer and I thought it looked fun, and I love the director. Why not? It's $4.99. I'm gonna pick it up, and I watched it that weekend. We both watched it that weekend, and Amy's actually watched it with me every time I watch it because it's one of those movies during Halloween that she's like, "Why not Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, baby, let's watch that shit right now." It's so awesome, and like you said, Benjamin Walker is badass. Dominic Cooper is awesome. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great, especially later on when things start going down with the family.
Oh,
Like,
she's such a
just
badass in this film. I love her as
Oh,
an
yeah.
actress. She plays.
I do too.
She plays Lucy McLean, John McClane's daughter in Live Free or Die Hard, the fourth
That's right. She
Die Hard
does.
movie, and she's so good in it.
And she's Ramona Flowers in Scott Pilgrim versus the World,
She
which you
is.
just saw for the first time.
That's right. Yeah, she's a great actress. I'm really surprised that she's had such a low key career.
Yeah, and
She's
but,
got the
you know,
look.
I'm
She's
kinda
got the
down with
talent.
it, though.
Oh yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, absolutely. She
She
seems
was
like
in,
she likes more independent films in general.
Yeah. She was in Harley Quinn.
Birds of
what was
Prey?
it? Yeah, Birds of Prey or the Emancipation of Harley Quinn. She was one of the
Okay.
ladies in that movie. I still have not seen the Thing prequel that she's in.
Oh, that's right. You and I need to watch that together. We talked about that.
Yeah, I think we should.
I think for anyone who's curious about this film or unsure whether or not they would like it, if you enjoyed Wanted, which, like you said, James McAvoy and Angelina Jolie, you will like this film because
Oh, definitely.
Tamir Bekmambetov, he makes great action films that are set in reality but suspend some laws of physics.
Yes, definitely.
And so
Yeah.
if you're willing to push your limits of your belief or your limits of reality to enjoy a film, then you'll really, really like what he does.
Yeah, fully.
And that's the thing is you can't take his movies too seriously. If you do, you'll just
Not at
be
all.
uptight and upset.
Yeah.
But
100%.
otherwise, it's a hell of a lot of fun. So if you like Wanted, watch Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
That is a great testament. I completely agree. And like I said, I will be doing his first film, Night Watch, in the very near future because that movie, we'll get into it when we do. I'm so glad that you enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, no, thank you for
I figured
introducing
you
me to it.
would. Yeah, when I was watching it this time, I was like, yeah, this is right up V's
Oh,
alley.
yeah.
I think V's going to have a really good time with this.
For sure.
And especially when Rufus Sewell shows up, he is just he's a villain for the ages. Like, I don't know if there will... And I don't know
he
what it is,
rivals
but
Gary
he is
Oldman for villainness.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Totally.
He's more evil than Alan Rickman. Like, this man needs villain respect.
Oh yeah.
We need to talk
definitely.
about Rufus Sewell more often when it comes to the most evil guys in movies because he is good every single time and he's different every single time as well.
Yes.
Like, remember in Bless the Child,
Oh my God. Hell yeah.
right? And he's a totally different character than he is in Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. Definitely.
And
And
he's
especially in A Knight's Tale.
And then he's different in Knight's Tale, yeah. But he always has that sense of soullessness
Oh,
that
yeah,
is
yeah.
so creepy. and
I
you
know.
cannot help but be very cautious and scared of this man.
Yeah.
I really hope in real life he's like a huge fan of My Little Pony or something. Like,
Right, yeah,
just
exactly.
completely opposite of the characters that he plays.
Like, if we ever meet him, like, hey, so Rufus, what's your take on Elemental? Oh, I love that movie. Oh, wonderful. All right, so you are a softie at heart.
Exactly.
Perfect.
His favorite movies are Pixar or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Soul and Elemental.
He's like a
are,
total
his
girl
two
dad or
favorite fucking
something.
movies.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. That would be kind of like one of those weird like twist of fates where he's just played such brutal people and he has to, that would be one hell of a revelation for probably everybody that knows him by name, or at least, because again, this is the third film that I've done with Rufus Sewell. Knight's Tale, The Holiday, and now Abraham Lincoln Vampire
Oh yeah,
Hunter.
and he's just a
he's
douche
such a
in The
prick
Holiday.
bag in The Holiday. Yeah, he's so awful.
He's not evil, he's just a douche, but same thing.
Which corresponds with evil.
Which, fair point, because the way he strings along Kate Winslet's character is so awful.
So terrible.
So terrible. But another thing about Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter that I wanted to talk about, not only because I'll have another excuse to say the title out loud, which is so ridiculous and fantastic.
I know.
Threading the needle of how historically accurate Abraham Lincoln's life was portrayed in this film.
Oh, yeah.
While sewing in the whole storyline with vampires was so creative and done so well that it keeps getting grounded in reality every single time after a vampire hunt or a fight or what have you, or something that's a little bit ridiculous off the wall. It comes back to history and you remember, oh, okay, now they're talking about Gettysburg, or now they're talking about him running for Senate, or it goes back to his family. And it is so impressive how well this movie centers on history, because they could have just been like, oh, this is Abraham Lincoln, and then just gone completely off the wall, thrown everything out that we know about him, and it's just the name, right? And they didn't do that, and that's so impressive. So not only do I want to thank the writers of the book and the screenplay, but I'm also wondering if there is a connection. I've always wondered this, I just never looked it up. Is there a connection between this book and film and Pride and Prejudice and Zombies? Is it the same person?
Yeah, actually, the writer of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter are both Seth Grahame-Smith.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And just what a brilliant mind, right? When you're trying to think of something creative to write a book about, you throw these two completely opposite genres together of dry history from the 1800s and now these crazy monsters. And I'm really excited about Pride and Prejudice and Zombies now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. He was not involved in the screenplay of Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, but he did write the book, and the movie was directed by Burr Steers, who wrote the screenplay based off of the novel.
Awesome.
So, thinking back to that movie, I had not yet seen Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter yet, and this Pride and Prejudice and Zombies came out in 2016. This came out in 2012.
Oh,
so 4
it came
years
out
later.
First.
Yeah, after seeing Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, I was like, you know what? Let's do a little bit more. And then Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter came into our lives, and it's a yearly watch for my wife and I.
Awesome.
So, again, very glad that you enjoyed it. I'm going to get into a little bit of the BTS for this movie. I already mentioned that the locations are as historically accurate as they can be. They did a lot of shooting in New Orleans. So a lot of the interior of most of the sequences that take place inside are all from buildings in New Orleans that actually are historically accurate to the time period.
And I've actually never been to New Orleans, but I have been to the South and toured
Neither
a bunch
have
of architecture, and it's so beautiful.
I've only ever been to Louisiana, Lafayette, to be exact. I have not been to New Orleans. I really would like to go to New Orleans. We did Princess and the Frog here, and I love that movie, so I wouldn't mind trying to go find Mama Odie or something like that.
We haven't done Interview with the Vampire yet, though, and that takes place in New Orleans.
That's very true, and that is a great movie. I think we'll have to definitely include that movie on the list.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're covering most of Tom Cruise's filmography in this podcast at some point or another.
Very true, very true. And speaking of the locations, the costumes and hairstyles were all as historically and period accurate as they could be, based off of research done by not only Seth Grahame-Smith, but costume designer, hair and makeup, and production designer as well.
His suit for his wedding was so incredible.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think it still holds up today. I mean, that suit is amazing and beautiful, and it completely took my breath away when they cut to that scene. I was very impressed with the costumes in this film.
it's pretty badass. The cinematography is a lot of fun too. Like you said, some of the CGI is a little wonky at this point now. I mean, it's 13 years old. I think it holds up a little bit better than Wolverine.
Yeah, I just think some of the action sequences, and again, that probably has to do with its budget as well, right?
Sure.
But the horse scene was a little...
Yeah, the horse scene, yes. Oddly enough, that horse scene, the reason why there are so many horses in that scene is because the artist that was given the memo on putting at least 25 to maybe 30 horses in this one sequence, for whatever reason, there was something wrong with the print of piece of paper that he got, and the piece of paper that he got said they needed 1.6 million horses.
I was thinking more along the lines of about 300, so I thought maybe somebody had accidentally added a 0 to that memo.
Right, yeah. So there was definitely something added to it, and there are a lot of horses in that sequence.
Yes.
And I'll give it to you. Some of it kind of, reminiscent of the opening sequence in The Flash from last year, right, with the babies falling and stuff like that.
Great analogy.
Jack Barnes throwing the horse at Abraham was pretty entertaining.
So ridiculous.
It is, yeah. And that's another reason why this movie is so much fun.
He's a vampire. He's got lots of strength.
Exactly, yeah. He's unlimited strength, really.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's get a little bit more into the BTS. Benjamin Walker, the badass that he is, playing Abraham Lincoln, trained for months to actually do his own stunt work and yield that axe the way that he did in this movie. That's all practical.
So
that's all Benjamin
cool.
Walker.
Love it.
So badass. He also ended up promoting this movie in character when he went to visit the personnel aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, an aircraft carrier named after the president. Yeah. Could you imagine, you're just like, hey, we have a presentation today, and you, go sit out on, the deck of a ship, and out comes an actor dressed as Abraham Lincoln, and he's like, by the way, come see me hunt down vampires in the 1800s.
That's actually a pretty good marketing
cool.
idea, yeah.
I would totally be elated with that. I think I would have a really good time. Benjamin Walker actually won the role for this movie by doing an audition where he delivered the Gettysburg Address to the director and the producers of this movie.
I would have hired him because when he does the Gettysburg Address in the film, I got chills.
Yeah, right? And that, we've talked about it before. The historical accuracy of the rise of Abraham Lincoln is pretty impressive. And if you've seen Lincoln, the Spielberg movie, just add vampires to it.
Yeah. I know. I kept picturing Daniel Day-Lewis trying to fight off vampires when I watched this film.
Right?
Wait a minute.
Definitely different actors, but at the same time, that would have been pretty badass.
Yeah.
Tom Hardy was originally approached to play Abraham Lincoln, but he had to turn it down because of The Dark Knight Rises.
And he's not built like Abraham Lincoln at all.
I feel like he would have
terrible idea.
I don't know. I've seen him bulky. I've seen him thin.
He's not tall.
I agree with you, though. No, he's definitely not tall. No, that's for sure. A couple other actors that were in consideration for Abraham Lincoln was Eric Bana, Timothy Olyphant, Adrian Brody, Josh Lucas, James Darcy, and Oliver Jackson Cohen.
Timothy Olyphant and Adrian Brody I could totally see because they're beanpoles as well.
Right. And Adrian Brody has a nose.
He certainly does.
And Benjamin Walker is very clearly wearing a prosthetic nose in this movie.
Yeah, but...
You can forego that, though, when you're watching it.
It only took me a couple scenes to move past that and not be distracted by
definitely. Now, Jimmy Simpson plays a character named Joshua Speed, who actually, in real life, was one of Abraham Lincoln's oldest friends. They ended up meeting in Springfield, Illinois. Joshua never actually did come to Washington, but his brother, James, was actually considered one of Lincoln's oldest friends, also in Washington, and served as Attorney General from 1864 to 1866.
Oh, okay.
There's a little bit of historical accuracy for you.
There's
since
so
we're
much
discussing. I know. It's just badass, beyond the fact that the movie is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
This film had a $69 million budget.
That's a lot more than I thought you would say. I thought this was a more independent film than that.
Oh, no. This is definitely a studio-produced film.
Okay.
Just under $70 million, which, looking back at it, watching it, the locations, the costumes, the cinematography, the special effects, a lot of the stunt work, I would have guessed it between 45 and 55 million.
Yeah.
So I think 69
that's fair.
million is pretty intense, but also, there's Anthony Mackie, there's Rufus Sewell, there's so many different actors in this movie.
No, none of which command a major paycheck, though.
Yeah, you say that a lot about the movies I choose, and I'm kind of getting sick and tired of it. I'm kidding. I don't know where the budget goes. I want to say that most of the budget actually went to locations because they were practical in New Orleans.
And costumes and CGI.
Definitely, yes. The opening weekend gross was 16.3. The domestic gross for Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was 37.5 million. The worldwide gross, V, why don't you guess? Because I haven't had you guess in a long time.
You haven't, and I'm going to guess $87 million.
Ooh, you were off by quite a bit. Shit. The worldwide gross for this film was $116.4 million. Yeah, I think it actually...
It was almost successful.
It was almost successful, and I think that comes from the fact that Timur Bekmambetov was such a well-respected Russian director that it did very well overseas, more so than it did over here. But still, congrats to everybody involved. Now, let's get into the highest-grossing films of 2012. I have done the year 2012 before. Now, V, I'm curious if you could tell me what the highest-grossing film of 2012 was. It was the first of, good lord, however many there are today.
Transformers movies?
Nope.
Well, that's not Fast and Furious.
Nope. It is a franchise movie. It was supposed to end with one of them. You know, if you're playing a game, it has to end at some point.
Game over, man. Game over.
Yeah, if this series was going to end while you were playing a game, this would be the first one of this series of movies. This series of movies.
Oh, shit. It's... Okay, Endgame, I get it. It's the
35
Avengers.
fucking minutes later, ladies and gentlemen.
But those were horrible hints. I kept thinking
Not
of
at
video
all.
games. Those were terrible hints. You didn't say anything about assembling. You didn't say anything about superheroes.
Endgame! Endgame! Well, we clearly are not Marvel fans here at Movies You Miss Podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
I used to be, but not anymore,
Right.
apparently.
After
Oh, dear
Endgame, we kind of fell off because it was supposed to end with that game. Oh, boy. Yes, The Avengers was the highest-grossing film of 2012, coming in at $623.3 million.
Unfortunately, now I understand why John stopped playing this game with me. Damn it. I did not...
I probably won't have you guess for another 30 episodes.
Shit!
Second highest grossing film of 2012, a film that I actually just recently saw in theaters again when the Christopher Nolan movies were being re-released. This is the third in the series of these movies. The Dark Knight Rises, coming in at $448.1 million. Number 3, The Hunger Games. Number 4, Skyfall, which I really did not like. Number 5, The Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn Part 2, which I have not seen, probably never will. Number 6, The Amazing Spider-Man.
But Mackenzie Foy's in it, who was in Interstellar.
That's right, she is. That doesn't mean I'm going to watch it, but
Yeah.
good for her.
Yeah.
Number 6, The Amazing Spider-Man, which I watched last year and was a little underwhelmed with. I didn't think it was that great.
Which I just gave to you in Blu-ray form.
That's true, you did. I'll probably watch it again maybe one day. Number 7, a great Scottish Pixar film coming in at $237.2 million. Brave. Change Your Fate.
I could never, ever get into that film. I've watched
Wow.
it 3 different times, and every single time I'm underwhelmed.
Interesting. We actually watched it while we were at Disney World, and I like it. I really do. Number 8, The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Number 9, Ted, the Seth MacFarlane, Mark Wahlberg, alive teddy bear movie.
And Mila Kunis.
$218.8 million. Yeah, Mila Kunis as well. I did not know that movie made almost $300 million.
Yeah, it was
That's
popular.
fucking insane. Number 10, Madagascar 3. Number 12, a fantastic end to the series of movies. There might be a fourth. We don't know if that's actually true or not, but Men in Black 3 came in at number 12.
I really hope there aren't any more.
I hope not too, because Men in Black 3 was fucking fantastic. Number 13, another great Disney animated movie, Wreck-It Ralph.
With Alan Tudyk.
Yes, with Alan Tudyk, John C. Reilly, Sarah Silverman. Such a great movie. Number 15, Snow White and the Huntsman, a really awesome take on Snow White, which I very much enjoyed.
Oh my gosh, we have not talked about that movie since the beginning of our podcast when I rallied against the casting of Kristen Stewart, saying that she's more beautiful than Charlize Theron.
Oh, yeah, right? Oh, I know, totally. She was actually pretty good in that movie because she didn't say very much, but she's grown on me as an actress these last several years, I gotta say. The 18th highest grossing film of 2012, 21 Jump Street with Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill.
Both of those movies are so good.
Yes, they are. The 19th highest grossing film, oddly enough, Lincoln with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Hey, no way.
Yeah. Number 20, one of V's most favorite sci-fi films starring Idris Elba, Noomi Rapace, and Charlize Theron, directed by Ridley Scott, Prometheus.
I don't know if maybe Hamlet 2 I hate more than Prometheus. But it's a close race.
Wow. What about Monkey Bone? Where does that lie?
No, Monkey Bone at least has Brendan Fraser in it.
Okay.
That's
All
much
right.
further down the list of hated movies from me.
Gotcha. The 29th highest grossing film of 2012, an animated feature film about owls called Rise of the Guardians, the Owls of Ga'Hoole.
Okay.
I saw that one in theaters. I was very stoned. I went with my buddy Alex. It was not a good movie, but it was a lot of fun because I was high. The 30th highest grossing film, Tom Cruise, Jeremy Renner, Simon Pegg, Lawrence Fishburne, and so many other fantastic actors. Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol.
What? That was only 30? That actually pisses me off.
Yeah, $87 million in domestic box office for that one.
That
I know.
is a crime, honestly.
I kind of agree.
And
yeah.
you're going to cover that film in the future, so everybody's going to understand
Oh,
why
most
that's
definitely.
such a crime.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
that pisses me off.
Number 41, via past pick of yours, Looper.
Yeah.
Number 49, Underworld Awakening, which was not bad. Could have been better, but
no.
not that great.
No.
They should have stopped after the third one, which was actually the prequel, but that's okay.
No, they should have stopped after the first one.
All right, I'll give you that one. I did like Evolution, though. I thought the second one was pretty badass.
I did like Rise of the Lycans just because Michael Sheen's in it more.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's the prequel. So
I know.
There you
yeah.
go. Number 51, highest grossing film of 2012, Sacha Baron Cohen and Jason Mantzoukas of How Did This Get Made? The Dictator.
I never saw that film.
It's ridiculous. I watched it with my dad, and oddly enough, my dad had a great time with it. Number 64, a future pick of mine starring Liam Neeson, The Grey. Number 78, another future pick of mine, War Horse.
Mm-hmm.
Number 82, another future pick of mine, The Cabin in the Woods.
Oh, we just talked about that film.
Yes, we did. Number 84, the 2012 3D release of Vee, a past pick of yours, and we actually used one of these characters to announce today's the day for the release of our podcast, Finding Nemo.
Yes.
The 90th highest grossing film of the year 2012. My pick for this week, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
Fantastic.
Yes, top 100. Now, if you want to watch Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, you can rent it on Amazon Prime or Apple for $3.99. I watched my Blu-ray copy. V, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Looking forward to next week. You want to tell everybody... Oh, actually, before we do that, V, would you watch Tucker and Dale versus Evil with your grandmother?
No, absolutely
No?
not.
Oh, my grandma would have loved it.
Yeah, of course she would have. No, it's way too bloody, but I'd certainly watch it with other members of my family, especially my sister Suzanne. And John, would you watch Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter with your grandma?
Oh, you know it. I think my grandmother would have had a great time with it.
Totally.
I wish I would have actually watched it with her before she passed, but she was with me when I watched it. I'm sure she enjoyed it.
I think both of our films, anybody over the age of like 16 could watch it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, that is episode 146. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this fantastic episode and discussion of two awesome films. I am so excited for next week because it is one of my favorite episodes, because not only am I going to cram another 10 to 12 to 13 movies before we record this episode, but I get to tell you what you should miss, what you could miss, and what you absolutely should not miss. So, V, why don't you tell everybody what the next week's episode is going to be?
Yes, I too am very excited. As a lot of you know, this is one of our favorite episodes of the year. We are doing our 2024 recap episode next week.
Hell yeah!
So please stay tuned for that. We are going through the list of all the movies that we saw last year.
There's probably going to be some screaming matches between V and I.
I don't know. Oh, yeah, there are a couple movies we've disagreed on already. Okay, yeah, you're right.
Yes, we have.
Yeah. I think it'll be more intense episode than our Oscar recap.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neither of us are looking forward to that episode.
Not yet. No, not yet.
No.
All right, well, thank you guys for joining us again. Please do rate, review, subscribe, follow us on all social media, TikTok, now that it's back, and Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the good things. Chat with us. Let us know what you've seen, what you're watching. If we should watch something, send us some recommendations. We do love that part about this podcast, the interaction that we have with our fans and our listeners. And as always here at Movies You Miss Podcast, we love to shut down with film as a form of art, and in art, all opinions are valid, except if you think
The real Abraham Lincoln wasn't badass enough to wield that axe and kill some vampires.
Hey, I like it. Hell yeah. Awesome. All right, we'll see you guys next week. Cheers, everybody.
Bye-bye.